The rain fell in sheets, a relentless curtain that blurred the world beyond the clinic's windows. Laura turned the key in the lock, her fingers stiff from cold, her breath fogging in the late November air. The neon sign above her veterinary practice flickered, casting jagged shadows across her face. Hollow cheeks, eyes like dimmed lanterns. She hadn't slept in days, not really just dozed between charts and Coffee Mark's dog tags clinking in her coat pocket, like a metronome to her grief. The town was silent, its streets drowned in the storm's low moan, each gust carrying the weight of a memory she couldn't bury. She climbed into her truck, the engine's rumble, a faint pulse against the rain's roar, and drove into the night, numb to the world, unaware that fate was already watching from the shadows. The alley was a scar in the town's heart, tucked behind a shuttered diner, its walls smeared with faded graffiti that bled under the rain's assault. Laura's headlights swept across it, catching a glint of something eyes low and glinting like tarnished coins. There, slumped against a dumpster, was a German shepherd, his black and tan coat, matted ribs sharp as blades beneath his skin. Rain pooled around him, mingling with dirt and blood from a gash on his flank, each shallow breath barely rippling the surface. His scars, pale and jagged, traced stories of battles lost his body, a map of abandonment. The wind howled, carrying the stench of rot and diesel, and Laura's heart stuttered not with pity, but with the eerie sense that this dog, this broken thing, was a mirror held up to her own unraveling soul. Laura's boots sank into the alley's muck, each step heavier than the last, as if the rain itself pinned her in place. She knelt beside the German shepherd, her breath catching at his stillness, too still, like a statue carved from despair. Her hands hovered over him, trembling not from the cold, but from the memory of Mark's funeral, the coffin's polished wood, the dog tags now heavy in her pocket. "I can't do this again," her mind hissed, urging her to stand, to leave this dying thing to fate. But his eyes, clouded yet piercing, held hers, and something cracked inside her, a fissure in the numbness she'd worn like armor. "You're not done yet," she whispered, her voice breaking a plea to herself as much as to him, as rain streaked her face like tears she'd forgotten how to shed. Laura draped her coat over the dog, its weight soaking through with rain, her fingers brushing his collar, a worn leather strip with a faded A etched into it. His head lifted slightly, not with fear, but with a strange clarity, his amber eyes locking onto hers like they knew her, like they'd seen her in another life. A shiver ran down her spine, not from the storm, but from the uncanny spark in his gaze, as if he carried a secret she was meant to find. He didn't flinch at her touch, his stillness a quiet promise, a thread of connection pulling taut between them. As she lifted him, his warmth seeped into her, whispering of a story yet untold, waiting in the shadows of their shared pain. The summer sun once painted Laura's world golden, her laughter mingling with Mark's, as they raced through their childhood yard, a German shepherd puppy tumbling between them. Those days, bright and boundless, felt like a dream, now shattered 2 years ago when Mark's coffin was lowered into the earth, his dog tags pressed into her palm by a soldier who wouldn't meet her eyes. His death, an accident during a training exercise, left questions that gnawed at her unanswered like splinters in her heart. Now at 32, Laura worked alone in her clinic, her hands steady with animals but unsteady with memories, each clink of Mark's tags in her pocket a reminder of the brother who'd been her anchor. The rain outside her window mirrored the grief she buried, a tide that threatened to drown her if she ever stopped moving. Laura's days bled into one another, a cycle of charts, bandages, and the hum of fluorescent lights in her clinic. She moved through appointments with mechanical precision, her smile a mask for clients, her voice soft but distant, as if speaking from underwater. At night, she sat in her office, Mark's dog tags cradled in her hands, their cold metal a tether to a past she couldn't reclaim. She avoided calls, ignored the mailbox stuffed with condolence cards she'd never opened. In the kennel, the German shepherd Ace she'd started calling him lay still, his eyes tracking her from Hess Corner, his silence a mirror to her own. The clinic's sterile air, heavy with antiseptic, felt like a tomb, sealing them both in a quiet descent where hope was a word neither dared to speak. Ace's body told a story of loyalty and loss etched in the scars that crisscrossed his black and tan coat like a map of forgotten battles. Once he'd stood proud at Mark's side, his ears pricked eyes sharp, trained to detect threats in dusty outposts where danger was a constant hum. Flashbacks haunted his stillness. Mark's steady voice calling commands, the heat of an explosion that tore through his world, leaving a limp in his hind leg and a gash across his muzzle. His handlers' faces, blurred by time, had abandoned him after that, deeming him broken, useless, a betrayal that taught him to flinch at raised hands. Now in Laura's clinic, Ace curled tight in his kennel, his amber eyes wary his silence, a fortress built from years of survival, mirroring the grief Laura carried but could not name. Laura caught Ace's flinch when a door slammed the same way her shoulders tensed at the mention of Mark's name, a reflex born of wounds neither could voice. In the dim clinic, she moved carefully, setting food near his kennel without meeting his gaze, sensing his mistrust as a shadow of her own. Ace watched her, his eyes heavy with a sorrow that felt like hers, as if they both carried ghosts too heavy to release. When she sat late at night, Mark's dog tags cold against her palm, Ace's steady breathing from the kennel seemed to echo her own, a quiet rhythm of shared loss. Their silence wove a fragile thread, not yet trust, but a recognition, a whisper that their emptiness might one day find meaning in the other's presence. Rain battered the clinic's roof, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out the hum of the fluorescent lights. Laura crouched beside Ace, her stethoscope cold against his shallow breaths, when her fingers brushed a hard lump beneath his matted fur, a microchip. Her pulse quickened as she scanned it, the screen flickering to life with a military ID and a name mark. Her brother's name. The air thickened her breath, catching as if the storm itself had stolen it. Ace stirred a low growl rumbling from his chest, his amber eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that felt like memory. Outside, thunder cracked and the clinic's walls seemed to close in the weight of this discovery, a thread tying Ace to Mark, igniting a spark of dread and hope in the chaos of her grief. Laura's hands froze over the scanner, Mark's name glowing like a wound reopened. Her mind screamed to stop probing further would mean facing the questions she'd buried with him, the ones that kept her awake at night clutching his dog tags. "Let it go," her fear whispered. "He'll die anyway and you'll break again." But Ace's whimper, soft as a sigh, cut through the storm's roar, his eyes pleading not for life but for something more. Her heart twisted, torn between the safety of numbness and the pull of compassion. She thought of Mark's laugh, his voice calling a dog's name in a sunlit yard. That memory, fragile as glass, tipped the scale. She couldn't walk away, not from this dog, not from the truth he carried. Laura's hands moved with a surgeon's precision, though her pulse thundered like the storm outside. She slid an IV needle into Ace's leg, his flinch a sharp reminder of his mistrust, but he didn't snap, his amber eyes tracking her every move. The clinic's sterile light cast harsh shadows, illuminating the gash on his flank crusted with dirt and blood. She whispered Mark, testing the name, and Ace's ears twitched, a flicker of life in his sunken frame. Her breath hitched. His reaction was no coincidence. The rain's relentless drumming seemed to urge her on each drop, a countdown. She cleaned his wounds, her resolve hardening with every careful stitch, a vow to save not just him, but the fragment of her brother he carried, binding them in a fragile, unspoken pact. Laura draped a warm blanket over Ace, her hands lingering on his scarred coat, the clinic's quiet, a stark contrast to the storm's fading roar. She offered a bowl of food, setting it near without crowding him, her voice soft. "You're safe now." Ace's nose twitched, cautious. Then he ate his eyes, never leaving her a wary acceptance. She sat back, Mark's dog tags heavy in her pocket, and felt the weight of a promise forming. Ace shifted closer, his warmth a faint pulse against the cold floor, their silence weaving a thread of trust. She vowed to uncover his story, to chase the truth Mark left behind, their bond, a flicker of hope against the shadows. As lightning flashed outside, Laura knew this rescue was as much for her as for him. Ace claimed a corner of the clinic's recovery room, his body curled tight, a fortress of fur and scars against the world. His amber eyes tracked Laura's every move, narrowing at the clatter of a dropped tray, a low growl rumbling like distant thunder. She kept her distance, sliding a water bowl toward him with a slow, deliberate push, her own wariness mirroring his. The antiseptic air hung heavy, the silence between them thick with unspoken fears, hers of opening her heart, his of betrayal's sting. Laura's fingers brushed Mark's dog tags in her pocket, their cold weight anchoring her to a past she couldn't face. She met Ace's gaze, seeing her own guarded heart reflected, and left him to his solitude, knowing trust like healing would come only in time. Laura sat on the clinic floor, unwrapping a sandwich under the dim glow of a desk lamp. Ace watched from his corner, his ears twitching as she tore off a piece and set it near him. Her hand grazed Mark's dog tag, slipping from her pocket to the floor with a soft clink. Ace's head lifted, his nose quivering as he inched forward, sniffing the metal with a gentleness that stole her breath. His eyes softened, holding hers as if the tags carried a memory they both knew. Mark's laugh, a sunlit field. Laura's chest tightened, their shared grief, a silent bridge, no words needed. Ace didn't eat the bread, but he stayed close, his warmth a whisper of connection binding their wounds in the quiet of the night. Laura's fingers brushed Ace's collar, its worn leather rough under her touch, and the clinic dissolved into memory. She saw Mark sunlit and grinning, kneeling in a dusty field, his voice steady as he called Ace heel. The German shepherd bounded to him, eyes bright tail high, a bond unbroken by war's shadow. The vision shattered as Laura's hand stilled her breath, catching. Ace's gaze met hers, no longer recoiling, his amber eyes heavy with the same memory, as if Mark's ghost lingered in the space between them. He leaned into her touch just slightly, a pause that felt like a vow. The clinic's quiet hummed their shared past, a fragile thread weaving through the present, tying their pain to a hope neither dared name. Laura hummed softly an old lullaby Mark used to sing as she tidied the clinic's lounge, the air less sterile, less empty. Ace followed her, his limp softer now, and settled near her feet, his warmth a quiet pulse against the cold floor. She paused, her hand hovering, then offered a piece of her apple, which he took gently, his eyes steady on hers. His tail thumped once, a fleeting spark of joy that lit the room like a candle in a storm. Laura's lips curved a smile she hadn't felt in years, as the clinic's walls seemed to soften, no longer a tomb, but a haven. Their shared silence bloomed with warmth, a fragile home built on the ashes of their grief. The clinic's quiet was a cocoon broken only by the soft creak of Laura's chair as she sat, exhaustion pulling at her bones. Ace lay across the room, his eyes glinting in the lamplight, watching her with a stillness that felt like waiting. She hadn't noticed him move, hadn't heard his pause on the tile, but suddenly he was there, his scarred muzzle resting lightly against her knee. Her breath caught her hand, freezing mid-motion, afraid to shatter the moment. His warmth seeped into her, a silent surrender, his amber eyes soft with trust that pierced her guarded heart. Tears welled unbidden as she stroked his head, his sigh a mirror to her own. In that touch, their bond solidified, a vow forged in the quiet, promising they'd face whatever shadows came next together. Midnight cloaked the clinic, the silence heavy, until Ace's bark shattered it sharp and urgent. His ears pricked, body rigid. He stared at the window where moonlight caught the glint of a car parked across the street, its driver a shadow unseen. Laura's pulse quickened, her hand tightening on Mark's dog tags, their cold metal grounding her fear. Ace's growl vibrated low and primal, his hackles raised, as if sensing a threat older than the night itself. She peered outside the car's silhouette, looming like a predator, in wait, its presence a whisper of danger tied to Mark's past. Ace's eyes met hers, his alertness echoing her unease, a shared instinct warning that the ghosts they carried were stirring, ready to step from the shadows. The clinic door creaked open, admitting a man in a worn jacket, his eyes sharp and cold as flint. "That's my dog," he said, nodding toward Ace, who erupted into a snarl, baring teeth and scars, his body low, as if braced for battle. Laura's heart slammed against her ribs, a memory flashing. Mark's voice hushed and urgent, warning her about handlers who'd do anything to keep secrets buried. Ace's aggression, raw and primal, mirrored her spiking fear, his growls a chorus to her unspoken dread. The man's gaze lingered heavy with recognition, stirring a panic Laura hadn't felt since Mark's funeral. She clutched the counter, her voice steady but thin. "He's not yours." The air crackled their shared trauma a live wire, pulling Laura and Ace closer as the past clawed its way into the present. The man stepped closer, his boots scuffing the clinic floor, his voice low and venomous. "You don't know what you're holding on to, lady. That dog's part of something bigger, Mark's mess." Laura's blood ran cold. He knew her brother's name. Ace lunged to her side, his snarl a blade cutting through the tension, his scarred muzzle inches from the man's leg. Flashbacks flooded her. Mark's cryptic letters about a mission gone wrong, a cover-up sealed in blood. "You killed him," she whispered, the truth crystallizing in her fear. The man's smirk faltered, his hand twitching toward his coat, but Ace's growl deepened, a primal warning. Laura stood firm, her voice steel. "Leave or I call the cops." He backed away, his parting glare a vow to return, leaving the air thick with menace and the weight of a conspiracy exposed. The clinic door clicked shut, the man's shadow swallowed by the night, but the air still hummed with threat. Laura sank to the floor, her back against the wall, Mark's dog tags biting into her palm. Ace pressed against her, his scarred flank, warm, his breath steady despite the tremor in his frame. His amber eyes met hers, not with fear, but with a quiet resolve, as if promising to stand guard over her unraveling heart. She reached out her fingers, grazing his fur, and he didn't pull away, a silent vow that tethered them through the chaos. "We'll figure this out." She whispered, her voice a lifeline for them both. The clinic's silence wrapped around them, their closeness a shield reaffirming a bond forged in defiance and the shared weight of a truth they couldn't yet fully grasp. Laura's fingers traced the dog tags, revealing a faint code etched beneath Mark's name, pointing to an old military outpost in the forest beyond town. Rain lashed the windshield as she drove, Ace alert in the passenger seat, his ears twitching at every snap of a branch. The forest loomed, its pines like sentinels guarding secrets, their shadows twisting in the storm. Ace's low growl vibrated, his hackles rising as headlights flickered in the rearview mirror, too close, then gone. Laura's heart pounded, the coded message burning in her mind, a flash drive, Mark's last act hidden at the outpost. Strange rustles in the underbrush tightened the air. Ace's rigid stance a warning that danger stalked them. Each step into the wet, dark woods felt like a descent into Mark's past, with Ace leading his instincts, a beacon in the gathering storm. The forest outpost emerged from the rain, a skeletal ruin of rusted metal and shattered concrete, its silence broken by the crunch of boots behind them. Two figures, military contractors, faces hard as stone, blocked the path, their eyes fixed on Ace. Hand over the dog, and whatever Mark left, one growled, his hand on a holster. Laura clutched the flash drive she'd found in a hidden compartment, its data a ticking bomb of Mark's secrets. Ace's snarl ripped through the air, his body low, ready to spring, his scars glinting in the storm's dim light. The second man raised a weapon, the click of the safety like a guillotine's fall. Laura's pulse roared, her grip on the drive tightening as the forest closed in the threat to their lives, a blade pressed against their fragile bond. Ace lunged, a blur of black and tan slamming into the armed contractor, his teeth grazing the man's arm as a bullet sliced past, grazing Ace's flank. Laura dove behind a crate, her hands shaking as she fumbled with her phone, uploading the flash drive's data proof of a military cover-up to a secure server. "Stay down," she shouted, her voice raw, as Ace held his ground, snarling, shielding her. The second man advanced, but Laura swung a rusted pipe, catching his knee, her fear alchemized into defiance. Ace's eyes met hers, a silent pact as the contractors retreated under the weight of their exposed truth. Blood seeped from Ace's wound, but their bond forged in this moment of mutual protection ensured Mark's justice, a costly victory sealed in their shared resolve. The clinic was a sanctuary of soft light, the storm's roar replaced by the gentle hum of a heater. Laura knelt beside Ace, her hands steady as she cleaned the graze on his flank, his shallow breaths a rhythm of survival. Sunlight crept through the blinds, painting gold across his scarred coat, a quiet promise of dawn after the night's terror. Her fingers brushed Mark's dog tags, now warm in her pocket, their weight lighter somehow. Ace's eyes, heavy with exhaustion, met hers, and the silence between them was no longer empty, but full, a shared exhale of relief. She moved slowly, bandaging his wound, each touch deliberate, as if stitching together the fragile piece they'd won. The world outside felt distant, their survival. A quiet hymn sung in the stillness of the clinic's embrace. Ace trailed Laura through the clinic, his limp softer, his shadow a constant beside her. She offered him water, and he drank from her hand, his tongue brushing her fingers, a gesture as intimate as a vow. At night he lay close, his warmth seeping into her as she sat with Mark's tags, their metal glinting in the lamplight like a memory made tangible. She smiled, a quiet curve of her lips, feeling Mark and Ace's steady gaze, as if her brother's love lived on in the dog's loyalty. Their routines intertwined her footsteps, his soft tread, the clink of a bowl, the rustle of her coat, a dance of small acts that wove their wounds into healing. The clinic's air, once sterile, now hummed with life, their bond a silent symphony of trust rebuilt from shared scars. Laura and Ace walked a forest trail, the pines whispering under a sky washed clean by the storm. His limp was lighter now, his black and tan coat catching the sunlight, each step a quiet defiance of their scars. She paused, her hand brushing Mark's dog tags, their weight no longer a burden but a bridge to memory. Ace nudged her palm, his muzzle warm, and when she said Ace, his eyes lifted bright with recognition, a spark of trust unbroken by the past. The gesture, small, deliberate, felt like a pulse, a rebirth of hope in the rhythm of their shared breath. They moved on, side by side, the trail stretching forward their bond, a silent vow that fear's shadow would never again dim the light they'd found in each other.